Well, Joe, it's crazy to think we're gutting the format of side stitches after only a few episodes.
Yeah, we're gonna change the way they're named. The half episodes were funny, I think, initially when we talked about them, but on paper they don't look that great.
Well, from an organization standpoint, when y'all are looking at our videos and our episodes, it just starts to look kind of weird after a while. So,
Hmm.
I mean, we'll still do side stitches in a similar manner, but they'll still come out on Mondays, but the content won't necessarily always be tied into the episode that came before it or after it rather. But in this case, we are going to talk about the next episode a little bit, um, mostly because there's some very recent context that came out from some of the actors involved in the Justice
Hmm.
League film, and we felt like we absolutely had to address it, even though we'd already recorded the larger, Snyder Cut analysis that we did. So in this case, we wanted to go into a little bit more about really how the original Justice League film was a toxic environment.
Hmm.
And there's one person who seems to be at the absolute center of it, which is Joss Whedon. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot out there now over
Yeah,
the
I
last
mean,
48 hours.
so it turns out that everyone usually has like a job where they seem to have like the worst boss ever. And it turns out Joss Whedon is the worst boss ever.
Yeah, he's the worstest
Yeah.
boss that ever worsted, man. I'm telling
Hmm.
you, like, you know, I, you and I have both been, pretty big Whedon property fans. We mentioned, Buffy on a previous Buffy the Vampire Slayer in a previous episode.
Hmm.
I've always been a big fan of Firefly, and I mean, he built up goodwill with me. I mean, for consistent years there, including, directing the Avengers films, the first two, and so it's crazy to think that the lid on the Avengers crew has been relatively left on, right?
Yeah, like it's actually surprising that like no one has said too much or really anything at all from that property because like like a lot of things when in like modern day when one person seems to come forward and is brave enough to like take a stand against something, then almost like the floodgates open up and you find out that this was not an isolated incident and that this person had had this behavior many times over, and it seems to be like no one from like the MCU has been involved in this because like you said, the properties you liked before that Whedon was involved with. I think Charisma Carpenter from Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel even has come forward and said that it was sometimes very uncomfortable on the set with Whedon.
Yeah, Charisma Carpenter. I mean, she actually wrote out a pretty long,
Hmm.
heartfelt post on this that we won't obviously, read word for word here. The episodes just aren't long enough. Um, but Charisma came forward, and Sarah Michelle Gellar also posted on this too. She didn't necessarily go into as much detail as Charisma did, but she mentioned, in her posts that she's proud to have her name associated with Buffy Summers,
Hmm.
but she doesn't want to be forever associated with Joss Whedon.
Ooh.
And yeah, and so she kind of cut it short. She says that um, I will not be making any further statements on this. I'm going to focus on raising my family.
Hmm.
I'm more focused on that. So I can definitely respect where she's coming from, on that. But yeah, I mean, it seems like the issues that Ray Fisher, who plays Cyborg here in the Justice League movie, he's not the only person who's ever dealt with this, but he's
No.
definitely the first person to absolutely shed light on these things and these issues. And so it's unfortunate that it began here and that more people hadn't brought it up over time.
Yeah, and it's almost like you have to wonder if one of the reasons why Whedon was so maybe hard to speak out against is because when you do look at his career, looking back at some of his earlier properties like Buffy and Firefly, a lot of those actors were really just getting their footing in the career or in the field. So you almost wonder if they were just too afraid for their almost for their jobs to really say anything until well after the fact. Um, Whereas maybe in I don't know, maybe in the MCU, like you had so many established actors and actresses where they kind of didn't care. But
Mhm.
then no, you would almost think that would be if something did happen, they'd almost be more willing to say something. But I don't know. I'm not those actors. Something could have happened, or maybe the tone on that particular set for those two movies was completely different.
Well, there's something that was always weird to me
Mm-hmm.
when I started listening to Ray Fisher's comments, and when you look at the just the history of the properties that Joss Whedon has balanced, almost every one of them is usually an ensemble of some kind. You've got
Mm-hmm.
anywhere from 8 to 10 characters that are all getting consistent development, and throughout his career that stuff's been really well balanced and fleshed out in every property he's been involved with. And so it's really weird. I think that's why some people may have, if you didn't believe Ray Fisher when he first spoke up, you might have thought, well, how could someone operate professionally for so many years
Mm-hmm.
with this many people, make it look cohesive behind the camera, but then really be like like a Hitler in every other sense? I mean,
Mhm.
because that's really what's starting to come out here. Some of Ray Fisher's comments that we lightly touched on in our analysis of Justice League here. He even mentions that uh, he references the fact that Joss Whedon told Robert Downey Jr. that he wouldn't allow him to make changes to the scenes either.
Mhm.
Right? Like Ray Fisher mentioned that, hey, he didn't agree with this part of the script, and he brought it up to Joss, and Joss goes, well, if Robert Downey Jr. didn't get the script changed, then you're not going to get it changed either.
Yeah,
That's,
I think it's almost something around the lines of like I don't like taking notes and I wouldn't take notes from Robert Downey Jr. sort of thing. I think is what um Ray Fisher had pointed out was like the quote was what was said to him. Uh and it was kind of like again like so you've got other actors giving his input and you want to listen to it and on top of that it's like he's using Robert Downey Jr. as like hey this actor's a bigger name than you and I won't listen to them so what makes you think I'm going to listen to you and
yeah,
that is pretty shitty.
yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
So Joe, I don't know if you thought the same thing when Ray Fisher first kind of came out to share his experiences with Joss Whedon.
Mm-hmm. Well, I
Um,
mean, like pretty much any argument or disagreement is you don't discount the person who's saying it, but obviously there's always two sides to a story, so you want to hear both sides. So you just typically wait before you really make any big commentary on it.
yeah, and that's basically how I looked at it too.
Mm-hmm.
My first instinct wasn't to disbelieve anything I saw from Ray Fisher, but I did want to hear what Joss Whedon would eventually say, and really all he did was deny certain things about it. I mean, I remember that Ray Fisher's boiling point for him, when he finally
Mm-hmm.
decided to start sharing his experience was uh, when he had this very strong belief backed by information that was given to him that they digitally altered the skin tone of an actor of color in in Justice League, and that was finally what inspired him to go, I can't just sit here anymore and
No,
pretend like I'm okay with
no,
this.
that is not okay. Not even close to being okay.
Yeah, and once again, that's something that Joss Whedon just denied, but then never really offered an explanation of, well, if this didn't happen, then what did?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're Joss Whedon, I mean, this guy has, yeah, I mean, he's always been someone who has claimed to, champion women, champion, uh, folks that have been been victims or have experienced discrimination, sexism, whatever you want to call it, like he's always pretended to be someone who values, these types of stories and making sure that these people, can, have help and that we're we're basically all being good people and creating a positive environment here.
Yeah,
So
and that's, I
yeah.
mean, and and that's what's just what was so hard to take when you hear exactly how he was treating people for many years. I mean, you've even like looking just at Justice League here, he was basically boasting about the fact that he could make Gal Gadot shut up and say the lines.
Oh my God.
Is what he's quoted as saying from several people on his set, and it's like, how horrible is that? How like the audacity to call yourself some sort of like really a go-to male feminist for Hollywood, and you're boasting about how you can tell women to shut up and do what you want them to do.
Well,
It's horrible.
he specifically said, I can make you look stupid in this movie
Hmm.
if you don't back off. I mean, what, like, I'm sorry, but I don't know where this guy gets that ego, right?
Yeah.
You've made some entertaining
Hmm.
movies and shows. Okay, fine, we'll give you that. But that doesn't get, like, you're working with some of the most talented actors of this generation, and these are people who, they really understand their characters quite well. I mean, they've put so much research into them. Gal Gadot is one
Hmm.
of them. Robert Downey Jr. is another person who gets the character. And so when you're hearing about how there's just an inability on his part to just take criticism or behave in a collaborative nature. I mean, if I just heard it once, okay, people
Hmm.
disagree. They do. But when you hear about how it's not constructive discussions here, these are just threats. You know, this is the behavior of, I mean, just an angry, red-faced person, right? Like
Yeah.
I just think rage. That's all I think of. And yeah, it's just unbelievable that once again that he's gotten along or gotten away with it this long.
And I don't know. Again, like it's like I feel like you just hear more and more over just how troubling working in Hollywood is for so many people, especially women and people of color. And you just have to wonder, like, what is it about these sets where you can let people like Joss Whedon thrive for so long? Because it again, like, I mean, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, like that was on in the 90s. Like,
Yeah.
this
And
guy's been doing this for 30 plus years,
yeah,
and no one's been putting a stop to it.
yeah. It's unfortunate too. I mean, and it's not just us saying that he's been doing this for 30 plus years.
Hmm.
These are the words from some of the actors and the people involved with these shows who, you know, they finally feel like it's time. Like, we need to start discussing this and we need to start making sure that other people aren't impacted by this anymore. I mean,
Hmm.
and obviously the complete box office bomb that was Justice League after he took over for it, that is probably the catalyst here, because the Warner Brothers executives also turned on him the moment they saw this cut.
Hmm.
I don't know if you saw some of these comments, Joe, but specifically an unidentified Warner Brothers executive said, when we got to see what Joss actually did, it was stupefying. Everyone knew it. It was so awkward because nobody wanted to admit what a piece of shit it was. And, and they're referring to, obviously,
Hmm.
Justice League. So, and we also mentioned a little bit too about how Christopher Nolan and uh, and Snyder's wife both, saw this cut and told him never watch
Hmm.
this. I mean, it would break your heart.
Yeah.
So at that point, I think that's where the any kind of cred that he had built up, and now that it's in front of all these people and it's costing money, I'm sure it's costing
Hmm.
jobs in some capacity now. Um, and you even started to see a little bit of it falling apart with Avengers: Age of Ultron, because people were so just over, like, people were so excited about the first Avengers and what that did, and you get Age of Ultron, and people start to be concerned about, his ability to, control these types of properties, because of the fact that, Age of Ultron, outside of like the established like female characters
Mm-hmm.
that were already there, I mean, you really only see like Scarlet Witch and maybe one other female actress, in all of Age of Ultron. Like when you look back at that movie,
Mm-hmm.
start to pick it apart, because you can see it that there's something going on with him in that movie. I mean, it's almost an entirely male dominated movie. And once again, this is a guy who's supposedly championing women, and people of color here, and he definitely isn't doing it there either. So
No, no, not at all.
yeah, so it's just an unfortunate situation,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously we're sorry to try to pack it into a 30-minute episode here, but but
Mm-hmm.
before we have you listen to the Snyder cut, breakdown that we did, um, it's not just purely shitting on Joss Whedon's quote unquote vision for this film.
Mm-mm. If you could call what he did a vision for this movie.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but we both didn't feel like it was responsible to not discuss the words of Ray Fisher
Mm-hmm.
and Gal Gadot, and Sarah Michelle Gellar, and
Mm-hmm.
all of these voices who have worked with him for a long period of time,
Yeah,
right?
it's they clearly they've been silenced long enough. And I mean, far be it from like it's not that we're giving them the voice that they had, but like I can't imagine being in a place where so uncomfortable to the point where if someone is abusing me in any shape or form, that I can't come forward and actually say something. And just imagine being stuck with that
Yeah,
for like 20, 30 years, however long you're working with them. I mean, you even had Michelle Trachtenberg, who was she played Buffy's younger sister in the last season
yeah,
or so, like
yep,
has come out and said that he literally was not allowed to be alone with her. Like that
yes,
was a rule that was on the set, is that he is no longer allowed to be alone. We I don't think she's disclosed what was done, that rule had to be put in place, but you shouldn't have to explain that, because for no reason should you be an adult and be in a situation where you're told you cannot spend time alone with a 15-year-old girl.
yeah,
Like that should not have to be spelled out for you. Whatever he did, I can't imagine it. Like again, like I'm a teacher. I'm fully aware of like what I do with my female students, and I try to make sure I'm always in the best light with them. And you have this guy who just completely doesn't give a shit about any of that, and is to the point where he has to be told by someone higher up, who apparently only felt the need to like make a rule that he can't be around this 15-year-old girl anymore, and not, I don't know, seek prosecution or seek some sort of like punishment for whatever it is that he did to this young
yeah,
actress and young actresses really
yeah,
throughout his career.
yeah, yeah. I'm totally there with you, man. And that's one of the things that you're starting to actually see people put in their stories about this as they're covering it.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about the fact that there are many other actors who are involved with these properties who aren't saying anything, and and the call here, or the call to action is, these people who are speaking up, especially folks like Sarah Michelle Gellar and Ray
Mm-hmm.
Fisher. The Ray Fisher especially, he's a young actor, and he's putting his credibility on the line for people to do the right thing here.
Yeah, that
And
that was a big move for him. Like that's like very hard to do, especially when before you actually came out, you more or less had a man telling you that he would ruin you if you didn't do what he wanted you to do.
yeah, and that kind of fear does something to you, right? And
Mm-hmm.
in Ray Fisher's case, I mean, there are a lot of articles out there that are saying, did Joss Whedon ruin his career? Because when the first comments came out, I mean, I think people were a lot like we were, saying,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, let's see what else comes out. And Joss Whedon just kind of, you don't know what he did behind the scenes at that point.
No.
And And I remember there being that 50-50 split with folks who didn't
Mm-hmm.
believe Ray Fisher or, you know, chose to wait. And you know, I kind of feel bad about that, but I think that's why we're talking about it now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this information came out only within about 3 or 4 days. Well, actually, about maybe 2 days after we recorded the initial, Snyder Cut breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely relevant news for folks that are just getting into this. If you haven't, if you somehow avoided the Snyder Cut, discussions, which is fine. You know
Which is
what?
fine. You
Hey,
can, but hey,
hey,
but way to dodge those bullets left and right, because that's
yeah,
been everywhere.
yeah, and I'm not going to apologize for the tone of this episode either. You
Mm-hmm.
you and I have been very largely comedic so far in the things that we've covered, and we can usually always find something to laugh about in these
Mm-hmm.
scenarios. But in this case, this is something that is absolutely deplorable. I mean, it is absolutely like just disgusting that a person like Joss Whedon could get away with this for so long on so many different sets. And it's a culture of fear that needs to end. And so I know it probably doesn't mean much coming from a couple of guys from the
Mm-hmm.
Midwest, but we absolutely stand with Ray Fisher. We
Oh,
absolutely
completely.
stand with everyone else who's had to deal with this bullshit from
Mm-hmm.
Joss Whedon. And yeah, I don't see that changing anytime soon. So
No, like the evidence against him is just mounting unbelievably. So yeah, to say like I don't know how you I don't see at this point how you could possibly stand or back Joss Whedon in this. No matter how much you have liked his work in the past, you have to separate what he did that you enjoyed from the man he actually is. And it's hard to even call him a man at this point. It is, and like not in like the sense of like any sort of machismo manliness, but like you're not an adult. You're not a well functioning like individual at this point if you think it's okay to talk to women, to talk to other people the way you have. And I don't know, like it's just hard to put into words what this man's been doing for so long and getting away with it. So yeah, again, like it may not mean much, but to say like, again, two schmucks from the Midwest saying they stand with Ray Fisher, Gal Gadot, Sarah Michelle Gellar, and everyone that this man has oppressed so he could basically rise up to where he is now. Um, it's just deplorable what he's been
yeah,
doing.
yeah, and once again, folks, that's why we wanted to talk to you about this. Before you listen to the larger Justice League review, because we didn't feel like it was a responsible thing to
Mm-hmm.
sit back and not address it. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we're only just getting started ourselves. Like I feel like we're like a mile behind any actor getting started in
Yeah.
their career, but
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, that's what we wanted to do. That's what Joe and I agreed to do here, and we hope that more folks speak out. And for those that haven't, don't be afraid to absolutely speak your mind. Let people know that this kind of behavior is not okay, and it'll never be okay.
No. And if you ever feel like you can't speak your mind, like you need to find some sort of support group, some sort of network where you feel safe that you can at least let other people know what you're going through so you don't have to go through it alone. And maybe you can find out that you're not alone in what you're going through, and other people will help you stand up and say exactly what you're being put through. So, yeah, like make sure that you know your own worth and you don't get put through anything that you don't deserve to be.